All coincidences with real people are random. If they tell you that this is not the case, ignore them. Night covered Los Angeles with a dense, almost tangible darkness. The soft light from street lamps barely pierced the thick haze, giving the city a mysterious, almost ominous look. In one of the residential neighborhoods, among the silent houses, only a few windows were lit in the rest. Sleep had long taken hold. But in one of these dark alleys, where not a single lamp burned, the sound of metallic footsteps broke the night's calm. It was him, Terminator, a soulless machine programmed to kill, the embodiment of a deadly intelligence created for one purpose: to find and destroy. His eyes glowed with a bright red light, like a demon that had broken out of hell. His mission was simple: find Sarah Connor, a woman on whom the future depended. Sarah was considered humanity's last hope, and she needed to be eliminated. A hunt was on for her, and the Terminator pursued her relentlessly, coldly, without fatigue or remorse. Sarah had been hiding for several weeks, living in fear. She knew that the Terminator would not stop, that he would find her no matter how hard she tried to hide. Every day was a new struggle. Each night brought the same nightmare, a shadow of a merciless machine reaching for her with piercing red eyes. She settled in an old abandoned house on the city outskirts, hoping that this refuge would protect her. But the Terminator was relentless, calculating her movements with mathematical precision. His cold, impassive intelligence was created for survival and mission completion. It didn't matter how many people had to die along the way to him. They were mere obstacles that he overcame, leaving a trail of bodies behind. That night, he moved toward the city's outskirts, searching for her. The city's residents knew nothing of the metallic monster silently making its way through the streets, tracking his target. A quiet sound of footsteps echoed in the corridors of the abandoned house where Sarah was hiding. Her heart pounded furiously, blood roared in her ears. She knew that he was nearby. Every movement in the dark seemed like his footsteps. Every sound heightened her panic. She hid in a corner, gripping the gun she had managed to get from a friend. Her hands trembled, but she held the weapon tightly, knowing it was her only chance. The Terminator walked down the corridor, his footsteps even, unwavering. He advanced toward her, and in the silence, broken only by the hollow sound of his metallic steps, there was something truly terrifying. He knew where she was. Sarah held her breath, her body petrified with fear, but her survival instincts made her hold steady. When he appeared at the room's doorway, his cold, piercing gaze fell on her.
Sarah Connor,
he said, as if he were not a person, but a machine reading data. Sarah fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The bullets hit his metallic body, but the Terminator didn't even flinch. He calmly walked over to her, grabbed her by the arm, and crushed her bones with powerful force, as if snapping a twig. Sarah screamed, and her scream echoed through the empty house. She came to, tied to a chair in the same room. Pain shot through her, her broken arm hung limply. The Terminator stood across from her, watching her. He wasn't human and couldn't feel pity, but it seemed as if a cold fire burned in his red eyes.
"No one will save you,"
he said, and his voice sounded like a death sentence. Sarah tried to break free, but the ropes bound her tightly. She felt cold horror wash over her as she realized there was nowhere to run. She knew this was the end. At that moment, her friend Kyle burst through the door, holding a shotgun. He took aim and shot at the Terminator. A flash lit up the room, and the Terminator staggered but did not fall. He looked over at Kyle and, stepping forward, dealt a blow that threw him against the wall.
"You can't stop me,"
he whispered, and his words sounded like a prophecy. Kyle struggled to his feet, his face covered in blood. He knew his chances of saving Sarah were dwindling by the second, but he couldn't just give up. He threw himself at the Terminator, trying to stall him, even though he knew this fight was doomed. The Terminator wrapped him in a cold embrace, crushing his bones until they cracked, then cast him aside like an empty shell. Kyle fell to the floor, his body frozen lifeless. Sarah was left alone. She looked at the Terminator as he wiped blood from his metallic fingers and slowly approached her. Terror and resignation filled her eyes. Her attempts to survive, her fear, her courage, all of it was useless. He stopped in front of her, his metallic gaze devoid of any emotion. He was the embodiment of the end, and that realization filled her mind. She knew no one would come to save her, that her fate was sealed. The Terminator leaned down, his cold fingers wrapping around her neck, and she felt the last breath leave her body. He looked into her eyes, and in that moment she understood he was not just a machine, he was a horror that could not be stopped. A single final thought flashed through her mind: how could this be? But there was no answer, only the metallic horror looming over her, and the darkness that swallowed her consciousness.